If you're asked to list the top global news stories over the last year, off the top of your head, what would they be? Chances are you'd come up with a combination of COVID-19, lockdowns, economic woes, political conflict, floods and other natural disasters. Hey, and maybe even Free Britney thrown in for good measure. What's probably missing from your list is any good news. And that may seem a bit strange, because even in the midst of a global pandemic, there were lots of positive things that happened over the last years. Now, researchers would say it's because of our negativity bias. We're wired, apparently, to pay attention to and remember things that are shocking or scary. Well, in today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, I'm going to chat with Mark Creedon, founder and CEO of Business Accelerator Mastermind. And together, I hope we're going to show you that the world isn't such a bad place to be living in at present. And hopefully at the end of this show, you're going to have more to look forward to. So, welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
It's not hard to find bad news in the media, and it's been said our brains are hardwired to look for negatives. But of course, the media loves feeding us negative news because I guess it's great clickbait, isn't it? But as I said in the introduction today, I'm going to have a chat with my business partner, Mark Creedon, founder and CEO of Metropole's Business Accelerator Mastermind, and we're going to share with you some positive news stories, some things you may have missed to brighten up your outlook for the future, because if you going into the future with a positive outlook, you're going to find good things rather than bad things. So welcome, Mark.
Hello, Michael. I'm really looking forward to this today. This is good news.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. It is good news. And of course, we could start off with the good news about the fact that the average Australian is wealthier than they've ever been before, and that over the last 2 years, despite the pandemic, the value of many homes increased by at least 20%, in many cases 30%. We could, of course, talk about the fact that anyone who wants a job can get a job in Australia, with unemployment being the lowest it's been for decades. And with the prospect of real wage growth increasing, it's a good time for most of us. And of course, we could talk about how, while unfortunately some businesses are suffering, many small businesses are still doing really well. And we're going to get to that in the end. But Mark, today I'd like to start with maybe some more big picture good news stories that occurred over the last year that listeners may have missed because of all the clutter of the bad news.
Yeah, and the bad news does clutter things up so much, Michael, doesn't it? If you turn on any mainstream media, they don't want to tell you the good news. They want to tell you all the bad things that are happening.
Sure. So what's the first thing that you read when you did your homework?
Well, when I started looking for good news, I mean, the biggest good news story that I could find was, of course, the COVID-19 vaccines.
Who would have thought, Mark, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, even a year and a half ago, that there'd be 9 billion doses administered across the world, with almost 60% of the planet achieving at least one dose? So fast, so quick. That is a good news story to start with.
Well, it is, Michael. I mean, it's the most successful global health initiative ever undertaken in history. I mean, to think that in 2 years, not only have we got to the point where we've got such a large proportion of the planet actually having received a dose, but we actually came up with a way. You know, we came up with a way to overcome a brand new disease and then rolled it out to over half of humanity, Michael.
Actually, you're right. It is a brand new disease, or was. It's now old hat, and it'll be interesting in future when people look back to see how they remember this. But interestingly, I think the other thing is, despite all the stories about the governments and others controlling us, on balance, the vaccine's been incredibly successful, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And I mean, you know, we've all seen all the epidemiologists on Facebook. Suddenly, Michael, I didn't realize we had so many greatly qualified people who appear on Facebook over the last couple of years. But you know, there's been that focus on social media, on mainstream media. Focus has been on the problems, on unequal access or hesitancy or, you know, resistance to mandates. But just putting all that aside for a minute, whichever side of the fence you stand on that, I think what's been lost in all the noise is the simple fact is that the majority of the world's population has actually embraced the vaccine And for the first time ever, we've got the chance to sort of end a global pandemic on our terms, Michael, not on its.
Isn't that great? Sure. So that's the first good news story that I think we've got to just remember, that amongst all the challenges of the geopolitical problems and the wars and the floods, good things have still happened. And on balance, most of us are much, much better off than we were a year or two ago, 2 years ago. There was another really good news story about cancer. I think that's something that's changing in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, the American Cancer Society released some stats, Michael, that shows there's been a 2.4% decline. And in fact, the largest drop ever in 2019 or 2018. So mortality from cancer has fallen by 31% across the US and Europe. Michael, I saw this news study that said that 4.9 million cancer deaths have been averted. Averted in the last 3 decades because of those great developments in lifestyle and treatment. It's made an enormous difference, hasn't it?
I think the other big difference is the fewer of us are smoking. I actually saw an old movie the other day, and it was Ronan Martin's Laughing. Do you remember Laughing on TV? And I saw it on YouTube. Pam and I watched it, and we had a really good laugh. But there was Dan Rowan standing on TV with a cigarette in his hand and a cigarette in his mouth. You wouldn't see that anymore. So I know a lot of the loss of cancer, the decreasing cancers, come from the fact that fewer of us smoke.
Michael, I remember my parents, their favourite shows, Mum used to love watching Dean Martin because Dean Martin always had a cigarette on his piano, and Dave Allen, the Irish comedian who sat on a chair with a glass of whiskey and a cigarette in his hand.
Yes, and half a finger missing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's really interesting. Certainly global tobacco trends have changed. The WHO, the World Health Organization, released its global tobacco trends report that showed that at the turn of the century, about a third of the world's adults were tobacco users. And by 2020, this had declined to under a quarter. And they're expecting it to fall even further.
Well, that's a good news story, isn't it? Talking about news, I remember, and you're old enough to remember as well, the concern about AIDS epidemic or pandemic. So just like at the moment, the news is a lot about COVID changing our world. I remember when AIDS first came out, there was the thought that was going to kill off huge portions of our population. Interestingly, it's gone down. There were still 1.5 million new HIV infections last year, but that's a 30% decline over the last decade, Mark.
Yeah, it's amazing. Michael, you would remember in Australia, we had the Grim Reaper campaign.
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten about that.
And I remember watching those campaigns and being, as a teenager, being genuinely scared that this was something that was going to impact my life forevermore. And unfortunately for some people it did, obviously, but it's, again, Michael, I watched a program recently on the ABC called You Can't Ask That, and the guests were people who are HIV positive. And, you can be HIV positive and have no viral load. So, you can have it, you can live with it, you live a perfectly normal lifestyle and can't transmit it. So we've come such a long way.
So I guess the good news lesson there is that, yes, coronavirus is affecting our lives, affecting how we go about doing things, affecting our business and our economy. But this too shall pass, as have all these other nasty pandemics. Because I remember, like you, being scared about the Grim Reaper campaign. I don't think it's worth going into detail for those who are too young to remember it, but it was teaching us to be cautious about our lives. Interestingly, we're talking a lot about health, but I know that also stroke, second leading cause of death worldwide, has actually, this incidence of stroke has gone down. But even amongst personal friends of ours, we've known experiences of that over the last couple of years of youngish people. So I think stroke awareness is important.
Yeah, it is important. Again, looking on the bright side of things, and we are focusing a little bit on health at the start of this because there's just been such amazing movement in terms of health research. Do you know, I saw this research that said that quietly and largely uncelebrated, there's been amazing progress made with age-standardized number of cases of stroke decreasing by 17%. But the other thing is that deaths have decreased by 36% in the last 2 decades. I mean, that's an outstanding outcome.
Well, Mark, I'm a little bit older than you, and having had some friends who've had problems with stroke, I have actually found out which the best stroke hospital is in Melbourne. And if, unfortunately, I get those symptoms, I actually know exactly where to go, because I've been told that if you get treatment early, it can reverse damage done, just like with heart attacks. But interestingly, I recently read a study that scientists found that living near leafy green areas cuts your risk of stroke. They actually found that people who live less than 300 metres from a green space are 16% less likely to get a stroke. And interestingly, it had to do with pollutants linked to car traffic. And so if you live near green spaces, you are less likely to get stroke. If you lived in polluted areas, you're more likely to. I guess they're coming up with all new ideas about this, and that's good. We understand how our bodies and how medicine's working much better. I read recently, Mark, that in 100 years' time, almost everything we believe to be true isn't going to be.
Yeah,
have a think about what our parents thought about all these sort of things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, my mother said if you got burnt, you put butter on it. I mean, it's all changed, hasn't it? It's all
Savlon.
Savlon.
That's what
yeah. So it's all changed. It's all
well,
changed.
It has.
Politically.
I think one of the things that's changed, though, is that we're living a lot longer. So we are getting more of these illnesses. Now, people are thinking, what are these guys on about? This show is about property, about success, about business, about money. But I think that property and business and money really is just a vehicle to have more choices in life. If you think about it, that's really what most people are after, aren't they, Mark?
Well, they are. And I think the other thing too, Michael, and we'll get into this as we progress, but the reality is success, whether it's success as an entrepreneur or success in property investing, just being a successful human being has an awful lot to do with mindset. And our mindset is so impacted by the news that goes on. And so really what we're saying is, let's give you the opportunity to cast to one side for a moment all of that bad news that comes, look at the good news, and let that feed your positive mindset and therefore your growth mindset, Michael.
Oh, very much so. Pessimists are usually not successful in life. I don't know any rich pessimists. In fact, I don't know any of our clients either at Metropole on the property side or in our joint business Accelerator Mastermind, all those successful people we sit with, they're not pessimists. And so therefore it's easy to find the negative things, but positive people actually look for positive things, including the fact that, hey, we are living longer. In 1950, before you were born and just before I was born, the life expectancy of newborns was at 60 years of age. But demographers show that in the 19th century, no country in the world expected people to live longer than 40 years. So when I was born, it was around 60 years of age. But the global health inequality made a big difference. So people living in modern countries and were able to expect to live longer, while people living in the poorer countries in Africa, Mali, 26 years was the life expectancy way back then. But today, most people can expect to live much longer in the richest countries. And I just looked this up to have a chat with you about it. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, life expectancy in Australia, it keeps rising, and a baby born now is expected to live to 81.2 years of age and girls to 85.3. That's with what we currently know. So you're going to live a lot longer. The government's not got the money or the pension to look after you. So while there's a good news story there, you've also got to actually look after yourself. And that's part of the reason we talk about money, about property, about success, about business, because in general, those who actually own their own home and have an asset base behind them are going to have more fun in their golden years. And those who don't and are going to be dependent upon the government, well, actually doesn't sound like good news to me.
No, 100%. The other thing too, Michael, is that as we live longer, I guess we work longer as well. And where that sort of strikes a chord for me is sometimes you hear it, I hear it. People say, oh, it's too late to start. It's too late to make a change. It's too late. The die is cast. Yet the reality is it probably isn't. And it's not, in fact, too late.
Sure. So we've known the stories about Ray Kroc and Colonel Sanders and others who started their business in their 60s. And that was 20, 30, 40 years ago when life expectancy was less. So if you've got another 40 years, 35 years to live in your 50s or 60s, don't waste them.
Great advice.
Sure. So let's get off the health kick. I mean, what's the other good news? I mean, politically, there's a lot of bad news and scary stuff happening in the world. But I found something interesting while having a think about what we could talk about. And while democracy does appear under threat worldwide, because bad news travels and good news doesn't. When Afghanistan's government collapsed, the whole world watched. But interestingly, and the same was happening with, unfortunately, in the Ukraine, when Indonesia, our neighbour, and interestingly, the world's most populous Muslim country, produced the planet's most effective democratic elected leader, almost nobody heard about the story. To be blunt, I didn't.
No, Joko Widodo sort of flies a bit under the radar. But it's a really interesting in comparison because when, as you say, when Afghanistan collapsed, there was all sort of hands in the air, and this is the beginning of the end of democracy. Whilst quietly we've got democracy growing at a rapid rate in a very, highly populated country right on our doorstep. So it's good news. It's a great example that no one hears the story, Michael, because what is it? Good news doesn't sell.
Yes. Look, I guess as we look at all this and we hear about these things happening in the world, we've also got to be grateful for where we are. We have won the lottery. You won the lottery. You were born in Australia. I won the lottery because my parents brought me here at the age of 3. So it has a lot to do with when you were born in the time of history and where you were born. Imagine if you were born in some of those other unfortunate countries, the odds are stacked against your favour, against you. The governments are corrupt, the country is poor, the health system's poor, the education system's poor. But there's no excuse. Well, in Australia, I guess it's not your fault if you're born poor, but there's no excuse if you die poor.
That's a very good point. And that sort of gets back to what we've been saying about tapping into good news. We'll talk more about, who you surround yourself with, Michael, because that's very relevant here, isn't it? It's easy to surround yourself with the naysayers or those that spread the negative news, but we know it's not conducive to growth and success in whether it be in business, in property, or just life in general.
Well, actually, rather than waiting to talk about that, it's probably a good time to say that because, we all have friends, acquaintances, people who continuously say, oh, you can't do that. No, it can't be done. Oh, why would you even try to just build your own wealth and get involved in property? I know somebody who tried it and they lost out. Or in your case, in business, why would you do that? If 1 in 5 businesses, is it 1 in 5 or more than that goes broke in a couple of years?
1 in 4 go broke, so 25% fall over. But we all know it's like anything. There's good reasons for that, and if you, that's the power, Michael, isn't it, of making sure you've got the right people around you and getting the right advice. We often talk about this, don't we? Every barbecue on a Saturday afternoon, everywhere around Australia is full of property experts and business experts and just, epidemiologists and all sorts of experts sitting around a barbecue on a Saturday. So it's important about where you get your advice from and who you surround yourself with.
Well, I guess there's a big difference between opinions and advice. So everyone's got an opinion about property, about politics, about which the best football team is, and they're allowed their opinions. But when they actually say, don't do that or do that, then that becomes advice. And I would be careful in who I take advice in property, in wealth, in business, in financial matters. You should only be taking advice from somebody who has already achieved what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, that's right. And someone who's potentially been down some rabbit holes, Michael, and made some mistakes along the way so that you don't need to make those mistakes. But more importantly, someone who can maintain that positive mindset, look to the future, see what's possible, as you often say, to sort of, take you to the top of the mountain, but then see the next peak and help you to get there.
Well, I like the way you say that. So people who listen to our podcast regularly recognise that we're business partners in Business Accelerator Mastermind, which helps small businesses get to the next level. And I found there are 3 ways of looking at businesses in the rear vision mirror. And maybe that's what your accountant does. He actually looks at the numbers and the figures and how you performed last year. I know some accountants will say, well, how do you want it to have performed? What figure do you want? And then you can look at it with the magnifying glass with what's happening now. But I believe it's important to have that business coach, that team around you that looks at it with binoculars, looking to the future, as you just said. In other words, what's possible? And then let's make some plans for that. And then let's help you get there.
Well, that's right. And it's not just business. I mean, that's true in sort of life and success in general, but it's absolutely true in property, Mark. I mean, that's what you do with your strategic property plan. It's not just about looking at what's gone on in the past or at a micro level at what might, but it's very much about looking forward, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's actually bringing their future into the present and doing something about it. So we help them get the retirement income for the futures that they want in their retirement years. And we do put a plan together, but the plan isn't to beat averages, Mark, and you know that. It's not to get the next hotspot or outperform. It's actually to create substantial asset base for the future. And that's actually a different mindset, the long-term mindset compared to the short-term. Let's just beat them right now.
Yeah. Speaking of long-term mindset, Michael, some of the other good news that I've seen, if you talk about long-term, is some of the work that's been done to save nature. Some of the most beautiful natural sites, places like the Daintree, the oldest tropical rainforest in the world, return to traditional owners.
I didn't know that. I've been there, but I didn't know it was the oldest.
Interesting. Return to traditional owners, created national parks. Oh, now, this is what I didn't know. It's over 160,000 hectares.
I knew it was big. So, yes. So all that happened over the last year, and I didn't even read about it.
I didn't read about it either. Fascinating, isn't it? But good news. Again, long-term vision.
Yeah. Okay. Another bit of news I found was a significant majority of people in wealthy countries now believe that having people of different ethnic or religious or racial backgrounds improve society. Boy, have we come a long way since the White Australia policy.
Yeah, we certainly have. It's interesting when you look at how far we have actually come. That concept of diversity within society, diversity within the workplace, and these are all positive things because what we're doing is we're tapping into knowledge, experience, wisdom that we can use from other people.
Okay, here's something we can't fathom in Australia, just the vast numbers, Mark. In India, millions of people have gained access to clean water in the last 2 years. About 11.2 million, or 38% of all households in disease-vulnerable regions, have now got access to clean water, up from 2.9% in 2019. In other words, another 11.8 million people, half the population of Australia, have suddenly got running tap water.
It's amazing.
Something we just can't fathom in Australia. So we are the lucky country.
We absolutely are the lucky country. And, we turn the tap on and mostly clean water comes out. So that's something that we can't fathom here. But Michael, I think one of the unfortunate things that I see, and I'm sure you see it as well, when we're talking about success, we're talking about wealth, again, whether it's through business or whether it's through property, is the fact that we are in the lucky country, but people don't take advantage of it. So people, again, look to the negative, and so what they do is they don't seize the opportunities that exist because we are, in fact, living in the lucky country. And I always think that's a terrible shame.
It is. So people come with a different mindset here. They come to establish themselves. They come to prove themselves. They come to find a better home for their family. And they take the business risks. They're the hard workers. They do the jobs that a lot of Australians won't. When I was looking at some good news stories to share today, as I know you have been doing, we do sometimes do some research for our chats.
Yeah, we do.
About electric cars and how many electric cars are being sold. I was surprised by that. Apparently, at the moment, 10% of all global vehicle sales are electric. Just to put this in perspective, in the first quarter of 2010, that wasn't that long ago, 395 electric vehicles were sold throughout the world. 0.002% of the passenger cars sales. In the last quarter of last year, 1.7 million were sold, of which, interestingly, more than half were in Asia. Sales in Germany and China were particularly mind-blowing. More than a third of new German cars are now plug-in cars, while the world's largest car market of electric vehicle sales has reached nearly 20%. And Tesla is the big winner, but boy, there's lots of others, isn't there?
Well, it was amazing because when you shared that with me, I saw that in October last year, the Tesla Model 3 was the best-selling car in Europe. Not the best-selling electric car, but the best-selling car overall. I mean, it's amazing to think that now that the world's car makers have accepted the inevitability of an all-electric future. In fact, I saw that General Motors said it would eliminate the sale of all fossil fuel-powered cars by 2035. Jaguar said it would stop selling them within the next 5 years, and Hyundai said they would sell no more fossil fuel powered cars after 2040.
Well, even Bentley's come out with a hybrid car. And I, over Christmas time, hired a hybrid car and was very, very impressed with the performance of it. The only thing I found interesting, Mark, was I wasn't sure at times if the engine was on or off because it actually didn't make a noise.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, look, I think it's a great thing. It's fantastic for the future. And
I can hear a little bit of doubt in the background there, Mark.
I can't see myself buying an electric car anytime soon. Not that I don't think they're amazing, and I've got friends who have electric cars, and they're like even the new performance. I mean, Porsche have an electric car, which is a great performance car. Mercedes, Audi, they all have great performance cars. I don't know, Michael, I'm a bit old school. I like the sound of a motor.
Yes, yeah. Okay, they'll probably make fake rumbling noises for those cars. Now, again, maybe we should talk a little bit about money, a bit about property, a bit about business, because there are lots more good news stories if you look for them. But going back to what I said right at the beginning, the average Australian is wealthier than they ever have been before, despite the pandemic, despite all the issues. Interestingly, it's been suggested that there's a war chest of $230 billion in household savings. People have put money aside. Lots of homeowners have paid off their home. Many homeowners, even if they just bought a home and didn't pay anything off, have got 30% more equity in their home over the last 2 years because of home growth. And our super funds, our share portfolios are performing well. And overall, the Australian property market is now worth very close to $10 trillion. And of that, about $2 trillion of that grew in the last year, in 2021 alone, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So that's a huge amount of household wealth. And even though we've all taken on a little bit of debt, overall, the debt situation is good. Now, the property market's not going to keep doing the same next year, but a lot of people who've actually taken that little risk of borrowing, committing themselves, getting some financial fluency, looking after their futures are much better off. And even though the markets will go up and down, the trend is that over the long term, well-located properties will increase. And I think with our borders being open and more migrants coming in, that's only going to push up our economy. It's going to push up our housing markets. It's going to give fuel businesses, give people the opportunity who aren't getting staff to get jobs. And I think we've got a good future ahead in Australia, Mark.
Yeah, I think we do. Obviously, the increase in immigration, the positive market sentiment, the positive economy that we've got is also going to drive demand in the business sector. So I can see that, we're going to continue with increased demand in business. We're going to have more people available for staff because some people are struggling. And Michael, there's going to be some sectors that are going to struggle, but some sectors always do. And within sectors, you always talk about in property that there's a market within a market or several markets within a market. And so you could say that the hospitality industry is doing it really tough. But I also know some hospitality owners who are doing exceptionally well at the moment. So there's always going to be those opportunities. Now, I suppose really what we've been talking about today is how do you tap into the fact that we've got this sort of maybe unprecedented economic performance, positive outlook, and it really is about having exactly that, isn't it? It's that positive mindset, tapping into positive, because that will allow you to open your eyes to opportunities when they arise.
Well, part of that is having the right people around you. Part of that's having a plan and then having a plan to stick to, whether it's business or property. And part of it, in my mind, has been to have the right coaches and mentors. That's why I've always run a mentorship program. And to be blunt, why I've had you as a business coach, and I have coaches in a number of different areas of my business life. And I'm prepared to pay for it because you've heard me say often, on my own I could run faster, but together we can run further. But even on my own I can run faster, but it isn't true, is it? I've seen you on the treadmill when we were in Sydney the other. Where were we?
We're on the Gold Coast.
On the Gold Coast, yeah. And you were much faster on the treadmill than me.
Do you know what? The important thing about that though, Michael, is you were there.
Yes, I was. Before you.
Before me. You were in the gym before me, and that's a good thing. Talking about living longer.
So if people would like to share the same business coach I do, what do you do, Mark?
Michael,
tell me. I'd like to know.
Is that where I don't say as little as I can get away with? Michael, Business Accelerator Mastermind, as you know, is a business coaching program which is designed to help service business owners and professionals in private practice to actually build what we call a level 3 business. And a level 3 business is building a business with, rather than just having a job. So it's building a business that is less reliant on them, something that they can step away from 4 to 6 weeks and still have as much, if not more, money in the bank when they come back.
Well,
So,
you got me to that level, Mark.
yeah, and thank you. That's exactly what we do. So we help, as I said, service business and professionals to get to that point so that they can have a business which is far less reliant on them. And that gives them, Michael, time, it gives them freedom, and it gives them a very high sense of control rather than the business controlling them.
Well, you started off as my business coach, you became my friend and then my business partner because I saw how well this worked, and that's why I got involved with you a number of years ago. And boy, has this division of Metropole grown significantly. So we help small businesses. In fact, we sat down a couple of weeks ago, one on many on the Gold Coast at the intensive. There were people from pool shop owners to principals to partners in multi-franchise car dealerships. There were small tradespeople to people who own small businesses, small staff, large staff, but they all learn from each other. So the great thing about this program is there's one-on-one time with you, one-on-many time with over Zoom, as we can do, and then face-to-face sessions as well. So if you want to understand about how you can actually build a business, not just have a job, why not have a chat with Mark? I'll leave a link in the show note, but go to metropolemastermind.com.au, metropolemastermind.com.au, and why not just have a chat and see if you're the sort of business that Mark could help? Because you're not for everybody, are you?
No, absolutely. And we don't profess to be. We're not for everybody. We're pretty careful about and selective about who we work with. But if somebody is keen and they're committed and they're looking to move to that level 3 business to get themselves that time, that money, and that freedom and control, then I'd love to have a chat with them.
Fantastic. So again, metropolemastermind.com.au, and I'll leave a link in the show notes. Well, Mark, as I said right at the beginning, if you wanted to ask people, hey, what happened over the last year? What were the big news stories? They probably wouldn't have mentioned any of these. That wouldn't have been at the top of their head at all. And there were tons more when I just looked on the internet what good news stories there were. So my recommendation to you, this person who's listening to Mark and me at the moment, be careful who you listen to. Be careful what news you listen to. Look for good news stories and appreciate your life. If you're grateful, you'll be wealthy. If you're not grateful, no matter how much money you've got, no matter how good your business is, you're never going to be truly wealthy.
Yeah, great point.
So, Mark, thanks again for our regular chat. Look forward to catching up with you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, they're always fun, Michael.
Well, today's show was a little different, wasn't it? We didn't really talk about money or property or business. But again, part of the theme of the Michael Yardney podcast is to help you enjoy life more, appreciate life more, be more wealthy and successful. And part of that is being grateful and appreciating what's going on in our world. So I actually enjoyed having my chat with Mark. I enjoyed doing a little bit of looking up and reading about what good things are happening that I totally missed out on, didn't know about. And I hope you enjoyed my chat with Mark as well. Now, next week, I'll be back with more normal sort of content. But if you got something out of today, if I enjoyed it, if I entertained you, if you just got some insights, why not tell somebody else who you think would benefit from this as well? Or why not tell the world by leaving a review on whichever podcast channel you're listening to this on? I'll be back again real soon, but you can catch me in between each show on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney. Or why not go to my private Facebook group? Just look for the Property Update private Facebook group, and we'll be able to communicate that way, because I leave some little snippets every day. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?